I'm going to be presenting today on behalf of Meg Holden, who is a faculty member in the Department of Geography and Urban Studies at Fraser University, and has also been at the forefront of sustainability indicators development and research in the Lower Mainland area. What I want to do is a couple things. First, I want to talk more about that teaching and learning and its relationship to sustainability indicators. And I want to introduce research findings of a course that we ran last summer that focused specifically on sustainability indicators. So I want to present on that. Not only did we pilot this course, but we conducted a bunch of research around it, assessing the assessment course. So I want to talk about that. But as well, I want, hopefully, time permitting, to inspire some discussion around the role of university teaching and learning in improving sustainability indicators practice. I see how long my voice holds out. I'm not sure if I have a bit of a cold or if it's from cheering so much for the last 2 weeks around the Olympics. But these would be some of the questions I would find interesting to discuss now or as the day goes on. The role that universities can play in improving sustainability indicators practice, and how can courses and programs be made useful for working professionals and others. I take this as a fantastic opportunity to be talking to people outside of academia and seeing what kinds of things would be useful for universities to be doing in preparing skills or literacies, what kinds of content would be included in specific courses dedicated to sustainability indicators, as well as techniques, methods, and media. I think that the university is very useful, or can be, maybe it isn't always very useful, an important component. We've talked today about the public sector and the private sector, but we also need to talk about universities with their three important priorities of course, research, teaching, and service to their communities. And these institutions provide, I would argue, fantastic opportunities for talking about a lot of really important things, really important big picture questions. As our presenters earlier have talked about, being able to think in terms of systems, being able to look at case studies around the world of things that are best practices, and probably most importantly, best political practices, meaning how have success stories, how in those situations have people been able to move from indicators to action, which is such a challenge. And real critical questions. We were talking earlier about the 200 or so definitions of sustainable development, and I think an important thing to add to that is who gets to decide then? Who gets to decide what sorts of measures, what sorts of directions that we're moving in? And this sort of dimension is something that is done in research and in teaching and in classroom settings, where we can talk about these really important questions with really important social implications. I just include this slide here because I often like to bring into my classroom music or poems or cartoons or things to break the ice. And these are just a couple ideas of some of the critical thinking that we'd start about. The image on the right, I always have my students talk about this image for quite a while. But you know, we're talking, both of these images show the same thing, government giving money to something. But the language being used is really, really powerful and really important. So we're talking about one as an investment and one as a subsidy. They have very different implications. And then if we develop metrics or measures around our success, this starts a real critical juncture, and this kind of dialogue has to happen. And I would suggest that the university is a place where this dialogue can happen as well. So what I wanted to focus on was a particular course offering this past summer. Sustainability Assessment for Cities was an online course that we ran through the Fraser University. And just to step back for a moment, Meg Holden, who was the spearhead of this particular course, had also spearheaded an earlier project, the Regional Vancouver Urban Observatory, under the auspices of the United Nations Habitat Program. Through 2005, 2006, we ran a very, very intensive year-long sustainability indicators community participatory process where over 100 citizens from a very diverse background got together 8 different sessions over that year to brainstorm what would be measures for our region that would better indicate our values. Measures to match our values was the byword. And this was a very exciting process and very invigorating for those that participated. Until the end, we presented at the World Urban Forum in Vancouver in 2006 to great international attention, and yet locally the Indicators Project, was, the citizens involved found it a very frustrating exercise in that the indicators did not really move beyond the round tables like we have in here into action in terms of local policy. This is just some feedback from local officials that shows some of the challenges or some of the barriers in moving from this sort of participatory process of indicators development to action. And a former city councillor says, if you ask me to cooperate in this exercise, I would say no. They've raised the bar so high that this is an absolute no-win for me. No matter what comes out, I'm going to be the problem. Right? So this is a local official responding to this kind of process. Current city councillor saying, indicators and actions are quite different things. You can present indicators that doesn't mean people are going to act on them. There are all kinds of indicators out there, and at some point you have to make a political decision about trading these off. So these were some of the things that the community found, some of the barriers as we move from indicators to action. And the citizens found this resistance of political leaders quite frustrating, and we found that it was time to maybe step back and look at how we could generate an aptitude or an appetite for indicators in the community. And one way of doing this, we thought, was through developing a particular course. Sustainability assessment for cities then was the first course solely dedicated towards sustainability indicators and assessment in BC. And I should add, I'm talking about this particular course right now, but personally I'm also very interested in how we bring sustainability indicators into other classes. I teach introductory geography classes, human environment relations, introduction to urban planning and policy, and I've been trying to find ways of bringing units of sustainability measurement assessment indicators into those classes, and I think that's a really fruitful dialogue too to reach a larger audience. But right here I want to talk about a dedicated course. It was developed through a very rigorous collaborative effort. Fraser University, the British Columbia Institute of Technology, the University of Northern British Columbia, with a year-long review process where we drew upon experts, many who are CSIN members, maybe even in the audience here. What kinds of things should we include in this sort of course? Looking at online delivery strategies, things like this. And it was piloted in the summer of 2009, last summer, as a 15-week graduate course where we drew on 2/3 graduate students, mainly in urban planning, urban studies, geography, architecture, those kinds of disciplines, as well as working professionals, mid-career professionals in planning or in environmental NGOs, things like that. We had interest from close to 100 students. 15 students finally admitted, 5 dropped out when they found it too much work, and we finally had 10 students that completed the course. What was interesting is we felt for a number of reasons that online delivery would be important, allowing to share across space, lowering impacts of commuting, allowing for more accessibility to this kind of a course offering. What was a very important finding, if I don't mention later, is that we found synchronous as opposed to asynchronous online learning very, very important. So by synchronous meaning real time. So software like Illuminate Live, which allows, for example, I could be giving this presentation right now. You could see a little video of me in the corner and all of us, and my colleagues back in Vancouver could participate in real time, seeing my PowerPoint presentation, seeing me. So this is something that we did in this course. Actually, we're able to draw in guest speakers around Canada, presumably, or theoretically, hypothetically, you could draw on people from around the world to be able to participate and not have to fly them in to give a presentation. So this kind of software the students really appreciated and found it was very useful. I should also draw your attention to the Solar BC Campus website, where we actually have this archived and you can look at this course. That's the shareable online learning resources. The course objectives were to build competency in the area of sustainability indicators, but also to explore opportunities of online learning and the promotion of online community development based on the recent thinking in education, trying to move from the sage on the stage kind of model to a more learner-focused, creating discursive communities, learners helping each other in practice, and integrating professional and academic learners as well. This was seen as one of the great benefits of this course. Grad students were thrilled that there were actual practitioners that they could talk to, and practitioners were interested in the idealism of the graduate students, and they kind of fed off each other. Some of the things that students did were, just so you have a sense, and again, you can go and look at all of the projects that students actually worked on, but things like developing frameworks that would have some specific use, for example, in evaluating alternative energy options in BC, accounting for social, ecological, and economic dimensions, evaluating protected area candidate sites in the Northwest Territories, and other examples of projects that the students worked on. As I said, we actually evaluated this course, so we did pre, during, and post questionnaires, interviews to try to find out, gauge the effectiveness of the course along these three different dimensions. Were students comfortable, confident, and competent in the online dimension of the program? Did students develop expertise specific to sustainability assessment? And were we able to foster a professional community of practice? I think just to be quite quick here, as I'm running out of time, that we were a bit concerned about this first one, developing comfort and confidence in the online learning, but that actually turned out to not be a problem even across generations or across different backgrounds. People found the software very intuitive, and actually were quite excited about this opportunity, especially the synchronous learning opportunities. Developing expertise specific to sustainability assessment, difficult to judge, like any course. Well, how are the marks? But a couple interesting comments, though, is a number of students mentioned that they found this was a really important gap to be filled in their education of human-environment relations or sustainability, is that they had learned all kinds of interesting things but had never really talked about measurement or accountability before. So I think this is maybe an important take-home message for education institutions, that we really need to emphasize the measurement and assessment tools. A lot of students are very interested in sustainability or human-environment relations, but are not necessarily learning about measurement tools or assessment, or the importance of rigorous tools for measuring. Probably the biggest failure of the course was our attempt to develop a professional community of practice, following a lot of the literature, Brown's work and others. Those who wanted to find community found it, and those that didn't bother looking for it. We felt that it would be important to try to provide this opportunity for ongoing community that would hopefully even flourish after the end of the course, and to be able to share and build a network of practitioners. But that was a part of the course that met with mixed results. I've only been able to give you a snapshot of this, and I actually have some reports. I didn't print off too many, but for those that are interested, I do have some reports that talk about this course as well as our evaluation of it, and there's a lot of lessons in here that we learned along trying to develop online learning courses specific to sustainability assessment. So with that, I'll hand over the mic to you.
I really want to push on the metrics that the institutions are using, and this is a question that came out earlier today, is how do you understand regional sustainability? So if your metrics are based on normalizing for growth or normalizing on per capita, you're not necessarily getting at the regional capacity. And so how do you do that within an institution? And how do you, especially since you're a learning institution, how do you push the boundaries on that?
Well, We report on absolutes, as well as the per capita. And it's interesting how the internal, different voices within the university internally react to stock versus flow kind of measurements. It's a real challenge to relate to the region, though, because the region doesn't have indicators that you could relate these to. So, you know, you kind of just, I mean, we just do the best we can with what we're responsible for, and we keep up dialogues with our neighbors. I think, I mean, I was reflecting, there were some comments made this morning about, you know, depleting natural capital and how do you relate these local systems to the big picture. I think that's extremely difficult, my experience. And I just, you know, it might be worth more research time before you try to do that in practice, because it's just, I think that's a big challenge to try to figure that out.
Yeah, part of the problem is at the institutional level, the motivation is different. I mean, Cam's slide on the two politicians' reaction is very telling, right? There are indicators that governments in general don't want to particularly emphasize, because they don't look very good. Things are not necessarily getting better. One example in our context is BC has a pretty active climate program, set of policies, in my view the best in North America by a considerable margin, yet they don't report on the success in achieving, you know, how we're doing in getting to the targets. And I think there'd be quite a bit of resistance to releasing that information, because they're accountable. You know, they're held accountable immediately once anything is published of that kind. So I think the answer is keeping the pressure on at multiple scales. We need that. We need that provincial reporting. If we set a target of 20% reduction, you know, how are we doing? But that will not, there isn't a natural tendency in bureaucracy to publish unpleasant information. So the pressure has to come from outside, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to reconcile something you said, John, about making the whole campus into a living lab. And Nancy, what you said about sort of almost death by 1,000 indicators. I mean, you know, you're really bogged down with trying to answer and come up with all this data for what you're doing now. And now you want to make the whole campus into a living lab, which I think is a great idea. And I really like the idea of, you know, sustainability as an experiment and as exploring. I think that's a great framework to have. And but how do you do that in a way that doesn't simply get you bogged down in collecting, you know, another 400 indicators? And how do we make, you know, how do we make the whole indicator discussion something that is, I don't know, sort of life-giving and fun or something? I mean, I love the landscape analogy you gave and the software. I mean, this is something that, you know, I could engage my kids in, but I don't think they'd want to come to this conference necessarily. So, you know, so how do you get at that by making it a lab in a way that works and teaches?
Yeah, I think this is actually the frontier for indicators. I think my own view is we have to do three things with indicators. We have to make them dynamic, we have to make them integrated, and we have to make them participatory. Dynamic means modeling. It is not good enough to just report this and that and that and that with no idea about how they're related to each other. This one went up and that one went down. Is there a causal link there? Without modeling, we don't know. We need simulation tools that show us how these indicators interact with each other instead of just individual items. They have to be also participatory in the sense that people have to care. Doing indicators by themselves have no effect, as we heard from that one of those politicians' response. Action and indicators are not very highly connected. Making them engaging so that people actually care is a good way to get politicians to pay attention. And so I think what we need is discussions that engage a significant fraction of the total population of a region. And the question being asked is not so much using the indicator language. We don't use the S word, sustainability, often when we're out in the public. Too many syllables. It's too academic. We say, what kind of neighborhood do you want your kids to grow up in? And everybody's there. It's the same question. Exactly the same issues come up, but it's in a way that is approachable to people. And so I think that's the way we make indicators live, is not better and better technical analysis. That's going to go on anyway, and that's driven by regulatory requirements and so on. That's fine. But that we need to also move out. And a dynamic, integrated, and participatory, we're starting a project, and I'm hesitant on saying this because who knows if it'll be a complete failure. We want to get the print media, broadcast media, all the museums in the region, and the gaming industry together and say, let's create experiences that will be attractive to tens of thousands of residents of the region, and will be all about what kind of future you want to live in. We've done these gaming things now with probably thousands of people in these different jurisdictions, and I can tell you people care about what kind of neighborhood their kids are going to grow up in, right? Or what kind of neighborhood they're going to live in if they're too young to have kids in 40 years. 40 years. You know, people will pay attention to 40 years. So I think it's doable, but we have to really make an effort to develop new ways of expressing and understanding this stuff. And I think Season, for example, just to put a pitch Michael's heard me make before, should be moving hard in this direction. We should be taking the incredible skill around the country on this stuff now, going back several decades, and sort of taking that next step to more participatory and integrated indicators. So, sorry, long-winded answer.
We recently wrote a paper in which we compare the many sustainability assessments and reports across Canadian universities, and we found many interesting results. One of them, you'll be pleased to know that UBC is clearly a leader in Canada. But we also found that there is a clear trend towards reporting eco-efficiency and green building stuff. And we used a framework that also included incorporation of sustainability in curriculum and research. And David Orr, which you know very well, would argue that one of the greatest impacts of higher education in the world is the minds that come out of the universities. George Bush, Bin Laden, they both had higher education. I mean, the problems that we see in the world are coming from very educated people. So one of the challenges for people like you is how to shape the minds of these people. So how are you addressing this challenge? Because there's also a problem of ideology. We are supposed to give freedom of knowledge, stuff like that. So how is UBC tackling the problem of incorporating sustainability into curriculum and research?
Well, actually, our sustainability academic strategy that I mentioned has a number of recommendations on curriculum and teaching. And the one there's two that I'm very excited by. One is, instead of creating a new school or program or degree, which would only ever be occupied by a small minority of the students on any given campus, we are going to institute a process of creating pathways whereby every single incoming student at UBC can do up to a minor in sustainability, no matter what program they're in, made available to them upon arrival in the university. We know sustainability is actually the highest value of all our recruiters find out there in terms of what people are interested in. Slightly higher is being in Vancouver, where you can ski and so on. So that's like the number one. But the first substantive one is sustainability. Very interesting, because we don't have an undergraduate program in it, and yet it's the highest value of the students that we're talking to in high schools. I think this is a general phenomenon that universities in general should be paying more attention to. So every student would be given the opportunity to add up to a minor. The advantage of this over a mandatory course is, first of all, it's many more courses. Secondly, it's not mandatory, so they don't hate it. And third, it gives us a good indication of demand. So we'll find out how many students really want to do this and how much they want to do it. We did a lot of surveys of students, and they said, don't give us majors. We don't want more majors. We want minors. And so that's led to this. So we're very excited about that. We're also excited about the prospect of having the possibility of every single student being able to do community service learning in some time over their 4 years, out in the community working with NGOs or organizations. And we have, Margot Fryer has done this amazing job of creating a community service learning process where it's now about, I think, 4,000 UBC students, mostly in the downtown east side, but scattered around Vancouver, are out there working in the community. So that's another way. And then there's some other suggestions. We're going to create some courses, SUST courses, that will be campus-wide courses that anybody can take as part of supporting that process. And we have now a group of faculty and grad students who have been working together for about 2 years in trying to think about curriculum design. And that's actually crucial because it's non-trivial, these kind of changes, right? Like, I can do any research I want, nobody cares. But if I want to change teaching, that's the licensed piece of property of the English department, right? They give the English degree, or psychology, or whoever. So once you start going into teaching, you're into a whole different game in universities of changing curriculum. It's way harder. So building that community, that network of people who are willing to work over years to make those changes happen is really important. Finding the champions. And now we have an office.
Getting the provost support.
That's right. We have our VP Academic is totally supportive of this, and so creating an office whose mandate is to do it is a huge step forward for us. It didn't come out of the air. It came out of years of slogging by dedicated people who want to change curriculum.
You have some. Go ahead. Well, I just want to say, I mean, in terms of integrating the curriculum and the teaching and maybe laboratory-based or bench-based research, you know, the campus is the living lab stuff, which is where the academy and operations will start to work more closely together, is an area where students will get a chance to work with real life at commercial scale opportunities. So, you know, we have lots of examples, but one that's coming up is a green energy plant for our university. And our campus is a bit unique because we have a lot more land use governance independence than other places, and so we hope to be able to test drive an awful lot of sustainability solutions that haven't been at that scale before, and that, I think, is a huge opportunity for our students to get the real life experience that will make them more effective ambassadors, if you like, and people who continue to push the sustainability agenda.
I just wanted to add a couple things, and echoing my colleagues here, and recalling your raising David Orr's point. I remember him saying that the earth groans every May when the new batch of graduates are unleashed from university to go wreak havoc on the planet. So we want to try to change that. But some of the other things that through other institutions in the Lower Mainland, like Fraser University and BCIT, that are some interesting things we're doing are, again, lots of opportunities for community service learning, which I think is a very valuable pathway. I'm a part of what's called the Center for Sustainable Community Development at Simon Fraser University, and we're pursuing the opportunity of having a master's program in sustainable community development and offer already a number of courses that look specifically at sustainable development. Also credit for interesting things, more opportunities for students to get credit for their own projects. So for example, we gave university credit to students that opened a farmer's market on campus, and they learned the business model of that and how to develop that and start, and they were actually given university credit for doing something like that. So what kind of opportunities are there for students to undertake initiatives and then get credit for it? We also, through SFU Sustainability Advisory Committee, we sponsored a couple courses for students to do projects looking at how the campus could be made more sustainable, more from an operations standpoint. One thing that we're looking at right now is a model that Langara College, another college in Vancouver, was developing, which took a topic and then tried to explore that topic through a number of different lenses. So, for example, this is a college in the south end of Vancouver near Punjabi Market, which is an Indo-Canadian community and business area. And what they wanted to look at was this sustainable business in Punjabi Market, and you could approach that from an economics perspective. So there's a unit in an economics class, a unit in an English class, a unit in a geography class, a unit in all of these natural sciences, looking at, for example, food procurement of the local businesses there. And you might look at that from an ecology perspective, or you might look at that from an economics perspective. And there were about 30 or over 30 courses one semester that all were looking at this one particular thing. And at SFU, we're hoping to do something like that too, where we take a topic, whether it's climate change, we looked at the Olympics, for example, sustainability around the Olympics, and then how do we look at that through all these different disciplinary lenses. The next stage beyond that is then how can we integrate some of this thinking and get economists talking with geographers, talking with ecologists, and so that's another opportunity. And I think one of the most exciting things for me in the Lower Mainland is what BCIT is doing. And rebranded the School of Construction. I think is now the School of Construction in the Environment, and will soon be the School of the Built and Natural Environment. So even the name of the institute of this school shows its commitment to looking at this connection between the humans and the environment. But beyond that, what BCIT is doing is talking about sustainability in terms of what welders can do, what tradespeople can do. And this is a really important group of people to have sustainability on their minds when they're going out and building and in other trades. So that's just to add a few other examples. But there's a long way to go, as you know. Yeah.
Universities are kind of like municipalities. They're always watching what the other city is doing and, what they should do to match that. So I think there is a lot of mutual awareness. The sustainability offices at the universities are in close contact. That's been more at the operational side. I think more and more we'll see it happening on the academic side. I'm just completed a review of U of T's Center for the Environment, and I've been asked to go and talk at Ottawa and Montreal about these kinds of issues. So I think there's, word gets around and there's a lot of mutual learning that happens among the different, everybody takes a slightly different slant, so most of us have lots to learn from other people. So that's, I think, happening, but could always be better, right? We could do more. On the economics front, it's a really interesting question. I'm on a committee of a PhD student who's studying the socialization effect of economics on students in terms of sustainability and what effect the introductory textbooks have on their views of sustainability and so on. And there's actually quite a field related to this, so that I'm learning a little bit about through him. And this is the David Orr question, right? What are we turning out? What kinds of skills are people having? And I think there's huge opportunities for relatively modest changes in some of the core concepts of disciplines to start to encompass better sustainability. But it'll take people like the student that I mentioned pushing at the envelope and making proposals, because disciplines are inherently conservative. It's a slow process.
Let me just follow up on that. What are you doing in the education system to educate people, students, staff, academia, to be interested in and to use and to understand measures of sustainability?
Well, I mean, our intent, as I said before, is that every single student at the university will have the opportunity to add sustainability to whatever they do. I think that's more powerful than giving them a degree in sustainability, because that'll always be a much smaller number of people. So it seems to me the university should take seriously as an intellectual but also moral challenge the need for that to happen. Not in a coercive, imposed sort of way, but as an opportunity. Because I think the demand is already there.
Talking more about sustainability literacy, are you teaching the students to ask the question for performance indicators?
Actually, my sense is the other way around. The students are way ahead of us on this stuff. I'll give you one example. I have a PhD student whose degrees are in piano performance. Both his degrees are piano performance. He plays around the world, and he's doing arts, culture, and sustainability. He's bringing to bear stuff I've never thought of about sustainability. I have another whose degrees are in chemistry and dance. She's doing performativity and embodiment theory and sustainability related to behavior change. Again, way beyond what I could have imagined. And I have one in engineering, physics, and mechanical engineering who's doing dynamic life cycle assessment. The students are more interdisciplinary and more engaged than we are. The institutions are slow to respond. And so I don't think it's, we got to get it into their heads. We got to let them do what they already want to do. We constrain them into disciplines and into narrow frameworks much too much. It'll never be the case that interdisciplinarity is the dominant culture, I don't think, but it can be a very vibrant culture where everybody who wants to do it can do it. And I think it will flourish if allowed. It doesn't completely resolve the problem you're talking about, because that doesn't mean everybody will suddenly be doing dance and embodiment theory and engineering physics. But nevertheless, I think in general, students already want more than we're giving them. What the minimum core of knowledge required to be literate in sustainability is, I'm not so sure that I'm comfortable defining that, I don't know. I think we have a 19th century model, right? The disciplines really emerged in the 19th century as a way of organizing knowledge. Doesn't correspond to what happens out there at all very well. We're stuck with it to some degree, but we should be at the margins. We should be taking the lessons from non-equilibrium thermodynamics and post-structural literary theory. It's the same lesson. It's the margin of the system that is where all the energy and the interest is. And let's give space out at the margin, and that will change the center eventually. That's my hopeful thought. I don't know if that's true or not.
Just two comments that I made. One of our research findings was, as I mentioned earlier, indeed that students, and I would concur with John, I've learned so much from my students about sustainability, but that in our research and talking with students, they did find that the rigorous measurement tools of sustainability was something that they hadn't come across, and they'd had all kinds of wonderful classes learning about sustainability and human-environment relationships, but hadn't really considered sustainability indicators or in a meaningful way, or sustainability assessment or things like that. You also talked about literacy in terms of staff. One thing that I think UBC has been very commendable at, and we've copied this model, is sustainability ambassadors in each department. So they can probably speak more to it at UBC because it's more developed, but at SFU we now have a champion in each department, whether that's economics or I'm not sure how successful it is in that department, but talking about sustainability in operations as well as how it can be infused in teaching and learning, and eventually through those champions trying to bring all different departments, all different disciplines on board.